All right, today I want to talk to you a bit about picking out your next rod. A rod is a very important part of our arsenal when it comes to fishing. When we get out there, we need the proper rod to be able to execute the way we want to. Now, assuming you already have one rod, so this would be your next rod. Most of the time when we get excited about getting another rod, we end up going down to the store. We see literally hundreds of rods, hundreds of reel combinations to put together. You talk to a salesman, he gives you a few ideas, and the next thing you know, you're walking out of there with a new rod and reel. But was it the one you really should have got or the one you really need? We want to make sure when you go looking for a rod that you're looking for a rod with a purpose. So you have a reason to want that rod and where you're going to use it. Usually when we decide we want another rod, it sometimes happens when we're out fishing on a body of water and we come across a particular area to fish and we can't fish it efficiently. For example, like if we were out fishing the lily pads, heavy slop, that kind of combination requires a little heavier rod. Then an average guy may not in his first rod have a real heavy rod with heavy line to be able to cast and efficiently use that. So that may be a path that you'd want to go, or you want to go just the other way with a lot lighter rod than you presently have. Something to fish a little lighter line, maybe an 1/8 ounce jig, something that's really efficiently uses light lures and light line. That may be combinations. We need sometimes a lot of combinations when it comes to lines. Let me show you. My particular box here, I have a variety of rods. I mean a huge amount of rods. A combination that I use. Now, it depends on the lake I'm going to and the combination I'll pick out to put in the boat to go. All those fit together, so when I get out there, I fish the body of water properly that I'm looking to catch the fish and the kind of fish that I'm trying to catch. Now, when somebody says, why do you need so many rods? And it's a little bit like a golfer. When he goes out on a golf course, he doesn't use a putter on the driving range, he uses a driver. When he's on the green, he uses that putter. When he's in the sand, he uses a sand wedge. And when he's on the fairway, he uses a fairway wood. The combination you get to understand when I'm going with this. When you're out there fishing and you're fishing the slop, you need a rod that's geared for that. You need a rod that's geared for the lure that you're using. You need a fishing rod that will work well in most circumstances that you are going to apply it to so you can fish it efficiently and effectively. Now, sometimes your wife's going to say, why do you need so many rods? Well, I say to you, just ask her to go look in the closet and ask her why she needs so many shoes. All right, we'll be back in just a second to talk about rods. Okay, when you're thinking about a rod, one of the important things to remember is that it does three important things when it comes to fishing, of course. One is it's got to be able to cast your lure. You want to have a rod that's sturdy enough to cast the lure, yet strong enough and so forth to be able to work the lure. What I mean by working it is like if you were fishing on a jig and it was on the bottom, that you could pop it off and keep good feels, not too loose, not too wimpy that way. Or if you're casting into lily pads and having it strong enough that you can cast it and keep it right on the spot. If it's too wimpy or not controllable, then you can't cast it into the spots you need to cast it to where the fish is at. So it's real important. Number one is to make sure that the rod that you pick will cast the lure that you're trying to use. Secondly, you want to be able to have a lure that actually works the bait. For example, if I'm going to go and I'm going to cast out and I'm going to use a surface bait and I'm going to rip it back and forth like this, a jerk bait, that I'm jerking it across the top of the water and underneath the water, I need to have enough backbone in that particular rod to be able to deal with the lure that I've chose to fish that combination. So we'll move it without being a lot of work to me and a lot of work to the rod, and it just works combination really well. Or any other combination. Third, you want to have it where it's got enough backbone that you can fight the fish all the way back to the boat with good control. Enough spring yet to be able to not lose the fish, pull the hooks out of their mouth, but enough backbone to actually move the fish the way you want to move the fish. Those are three real critical things when you're picking out a rod that it would do for you for what you're using it for. Most important is one that will cast the lure you chose to get in the spot. Because if you don't do that, then you don't have to worry about 2 and 3 because it's not going to happen. So make sure that's the case in point. I often get the question of how long should a rod be? What kind of rod? How long should I make it? 6 foot, 6.5 foot? Well, I tell you, over the last years, earlier years, maybe 25 years ago, you got a 6-foot rod, you had a long rod. Today, 7.6 isn't even real long. 7 feet rods are very common, and 6 and 6.6 are on the low end. Now that's the combination of rod length. It goes back to how you want to cast a lure, how much control you have of casting that lure. A longer rod will usually give you often a longer cast, but not necessarily give you the same control as a smaller 6.5 foot rod will versus a 7.6. The combination is a little bit easier to deal with when you have a smaller rod. It gives you a little bit more focus points on how it works. So that's an important thing to consider. If you have a long enough rod and you're fishing, like for example muskie, and you want to use the figure 8, well boy, I tell you what, that's what's happening in muskie fishing. These rods are getting longer, so you can control the bait a little differently and get longer casts and good efficiency, and they're strong, sturdy, and works real well. You get a smaller rod when you want to have real precision control. Like sometimes when I'm fishing docks, I don't usually want to use anything. I'll use a 6 or a 6.5 foot rod because I like to get pretty close to the docks. I like to be able to skip it, and I want to have super control of exactly where that lure goes. Now if I have too long a rod, I don't have the same control as I do with a little shorter rod. So you have to consider where you're going to fish this, and that would determine the length of rod that you're going to be comfortable with. And all of them take time to get comfortable with. Rod handles. I tell you what, that's a big part of the rod. When you pick it out, it's got to feel comfortable to your hand. When you put your hand into the rod, it's got to feel comfortable. When you do test a rod, put a reel on it. If you're at the store, put a reel as close to the one that you got on it. Have the salesman get it out and put your hand on it so you can feel what that reel feels like with the rod, because it can make quite a change when you get it home. The other thing you want to be able to do is they have a lot of sensitivity now, and the blanks today, as far as rod blanks go, they're really, really good. Even the less expensive ones have great feel, great effect on them. They may just give up on some of the eyelets and some of the other materials. But generally speaking, you don't have to spend a slew of money to get a really quality rod. The important thing is it fits your needs, number one. Now you can get a nice touch. The other thing that's got to have a good handle, a good clasp for as far as your reel on it, so it's locked on. Your reel's locked on. Sometimes it's not tight. It won't. You could actually lose the reel when you cast. The other features is the length of the handle on this. I personally kind of like a long handle length on it, and the reason I do is because one is if I'm fishing and I'm fishing like this and I'm casting, I will cast with two hands. Spinning, I can't hardly show you down here, but I can cast with two hands that way and get nice spin, because really your casting is really coming from right here. Your pivot point's right there. So when you use your hand here in there and you use it as a rip, it uses a combination, and you really get a nice cast using a little longer handle in that direction. If I'm explaining that correct, it really works well. The other thing that you consider when you're fighting that fish, I kind of like the longer handle. When I'm fighting that fish like this, I got the rod bent like this. It's up against my arm, and I can feel the pressure of that fish and not lose him. I can keep good combination. He won't get away from me, and I feel good about it. It's not all wrist motion, it's my whole arm motion. It really works well. Those are a few things of being able to pick the right handle. And of course, your spinning reel or spinning rod works the same kind of combination. You can get the same kind of handles, just a little bit different configuration. Balanced rod and reel. Boy, I tell you what, I brought that up at seminars more than once, and I'm not sure exactly what I'm talking about. And one of the things that it is, it's really truly trying to get your reel, your line, and your rod all in a combination that fit each other. For example, you don't want to have a stiff rod that's geared for maybe 20 to 30 pound test line, something like you use on heavy musky line, and then go out and try to fish it with a 4 pound test line. It's not a combination that will work. The rod will snap the line. So you have to have a combination that works well. So when you put this together, the manufacturer gives you a couple ideas. He gives you like maybe 10 to 20 pound test line and fish 1/4 ounce, maybe to 1 1/4 ounces, somewhere in there. So that's kind of your guideline. I wouldn't put that, to the bank and say, my personal feeling is that gives you a guideline to start with, and then you start fishing with it, and you'll be able to tell where you want to go with it, whether it's a combination of the weight that you like. The other thing though is you do want to keep the rod and line combination together pretty safely. Now, a rod's designed to really go only 90 degrees bend. It's not designed to go beyond that. So when you're out fishing and you catch that big fish and he goes under the boat and bends that rod down real close, you're kind of at high risk. Once that rod goes beyond 90 degrees, either you can break the line or you can break the rod. So the combination there is important to kind of keep that together so your drag goes, so your rod don't, That combination is real important. But the balancing of that is your line, your reel, and your rod are balanced for a combination that was in that particular guideline, between that 10 and 20 pound test. And you end up, usually we often use it wrongly. Sometimes we'll put too heavy a line on it, we'll put too light a line on it, but then we fight it. We're trying to make our rod do more things than what it should. There's a combination of happiness in there when it comes to rods. Now I'm going to show you one other balancing point that I've been doing for years, and I really work, and I hope you take this and give it a try on one of your rods. The balancing a rod, when you take a rod, I'm going to show you this combination. This is a rod without my combination here, and I balance it right here, just a rod without the reel. Here's my balance point right here. See where it's at according to my rod? It's up pretty far where it's at, right there. But what I've done is I put rate in here. Now what this is nothing more than taking some sinkers and smashing them up, making them flat. And this here is like at the store you get for a little leg mount, they're like 1 inch, which happens to fit this really well on the end of the rod. I put that combination, and you're saying, boy, Mike, you're putting rate on your rod. I say, yeah, I am. But you would not believe it. If I could put this in your hand, you wouldn't believe how much this changes this rod. I put it right there. It's maybe 2.5 ounces. And when I grab this rod now, boy, I tell you what, it just feels so light. Even though I've added rate to it, it's light. Now the beauty in understanding that, well, it's not just to make the rod seem lighter to you, because it does. You're putting a reel on it and so forth, but you've raised your balance point down. Way back here, I've changed my balance point almost 3 or 4 inches in the rod. But what it does is it keeps the tip very light. Now, if you're casting and fishing a little jig and you're fighting it off the bottom, you want to have as much sensitivity as you possibly can. If your rod has such tip heavy rate of rate, you already are fighting some rate of that rod. Now, without that, you can feel every little bite much more sensitive. So if your rod's real sensitive, this will make it even more sensitive. Try that. I guarantee you're going to put them on all your rods. I have pretty much most of the rods that I have. Hopefully all these tips helped you out. I tell you what, when you go next to the next rod, keep in mind it's for you, you're fishing, and make these steps. Now I don't want you to think that you can only fish a particular rod in one bait, one combination. That's not true. That's not what I'm saying at all. You want to fish a combination of baits in that particular category that you're using, and a combination of rates so they all feel good when you're fishing with that rod. If you get the right rod combination, you can fish a lot of different rates, a lot of different lures in a lot of different areas, but you're going to feel comfortable in all of them. Every cast you make on every lure you have for that combination is going to feel good. Well, good luck. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Fishing Show Fishing Tips on YouTube.